Look at yourself. Who are you? You are Napoleon, the man who changed the world, a storm that swept across a continent. Your name is whispered in every corner of the globe. Some call you a liberator, others a tyrant. But before the empire, there was only the man. Let's remember how it all began in the dust of a forgotten island and how it reached its lonely end amidst the Atlantic waves. You were born in 1769 in Ajaccio. Your island smelled of salt, wild maquis, and gunpowder. The Corsicans had just lost their war against France, and the air was thick with the bitterness of defeat. You grew up in a family where pride was the only capital. Your father, Carlo, dreamed of nobility, but it was the harsh reality of the mountains that shaped you. Your mother, Letizia, was stern. She was the bedrock of the family. She would whip you for any misstep, teaching you that the world doesn't forgive weakness. But it was she who taught you how to survive, how to endure, and how to carry yourself with the dignity of a king, even when your pockets were empty. At 9 years old, the military school at Brienne. You were an outsider, a foreigner in a land of aristocrats. You were small, poor, with a thick, ridiculous Corsican accent that made the French boys sneer. Napoleon, they mocked, turning your name into a slur. You grew to hate them all, their polished manners and their unearned privilege. While others played, you retreated into the silence of the school library. You read about Caesar's legions and Hannibal's elephants. You lived in the shadows of great men, preparing for a destiny they couldn't yet see. In winter, the playground became your first battlefield. You led a snowball fight, not as a child at play, but as a commander at war, building fortifications so geometrically perfect and strategically sound that the teachers were left breathless. That was your first triumph, a glimpse of the genius within. You realized then a truth that would guide you to the throne. Discipline and calculation beat any numerical advantage. At 16, you are a lieutenant of artillery, wearing a uniform that felt too big for your thin frame. Your father's death left you with a mountain of debts and a swarm of younger brothers and sisters looking to you for bread. You lived on the brink of starvation in lonely garrison towns, eating only once a day, skipping meals to send every spare sou back home to your mother. You spent your nights reading everything, from complex ballistics manuals to the romantic novels of Rousseau. You were a sponge, soaking up the knowledge of an era that was about to explode. The revolution of 1789 became your ticket to eternity. The old world was dying, and you were ready to bury it. Paris was boiling with blood and hope. In 1793 at Toulon, you achieved the impossible. While older generals hesitated, you saw the key to the city. You positioned your cannons with such lethal precision that the British fleet fled the harbor in terror, their sails lit by the fires of your victory. At 24, you were a general, but luck is a fickle mistress. After the fall of Robespierre, the wind changed. You were nearly sent to the guillotine. You sat in a cold prison cell, watching your dreams turn to ash. You wandered the streets of Paris without an assignment, wearing tattered boots, forgotten by the men in power, until the royalists raised an insurrection, threatening to tear the Republic apart. They gave you cannons and a single command. You did not flinch, mowing down the crowd with a whiff of grape shot on the steps of Saint-Roch. You saved the Republic with iron and fire. That night, the name Bonaparte was on everyone's lips. You became General Vendémiaire. Then, you met Joséphine. She was older, more experienced, a survivor of the terror. She was the height of Parisian chic and whispered grace. You, the rough soldier, fell in love like a schoolboy, writing letters. You married her in a rush, and only 2 days later, you hurried off to the Alps. In Italy, a crowd of ragamuffins awaited you, an army that had forgotten how to fight. Soldiers, you are naked and hungry, you told them, looking into their hollow eyes. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. There you will find honor, glory, and riches. And you let them. You were a whirlwind. You flew between the Austrian columns, moving faster than the maps allowed. You were not a general who watched from afar. You personally braved the bullets on the bridge at Arcole, grabbing the colors and charging into the smoke when your men wavered. In 1 year, with a starving army, you accomplished what the great kings of France could not do for centuries. You shattered empires and redrew borders with the tip of your sword. You returned to Paris not as a simple general, but as a living hero, a legend in the making. But Europe was too small for your ambition. You dreamed of the East, of following the path of the ancients, the pyramids, the Sphinx, the shadow of Alexander the Great. You wanted to conquer the cradle of civilization. You crushed the Mamluk cavalry in the shadow of the Pharaohs, but the sea betrayed you. Admiral Nelson burned your fleet at the Nile, cutting you off from France. You were stranded in the desert, fighting plagues and heat, but your mind was already back in Paris. France was calling. The Directory government had rotted through, paralyzed by corruption. You abandoned your army, slipped through the British blockade like a ghost, and returned to a country waiting for a savior. The 18th of Brumaire, the coup that changed everything. You entered the assembly hall, met with shouts of "dictator," but the bayonets were on your side. Your soldiers entered the room and literally swept the politicians away. Deputies jumped through the windows to escape the steel. You became the first consul. You didn't just rule, you rebuilt. You gave the country the Napoleonic Code, a masterpiece of logic that still forms the basis of European law today. You reconciled with the church, built the great roads of France, silenced the chaos, and restored order to a nation exhausted by blood. But being consul was only the beginning. The crown was already calling. December 2nd, 1804. A freezing morning at Notre Dame. The air was thick with incense and the weight of history. You did not let the Pope place the crown on your head. You took the golden laurels with your own hands and set them upon your brow, crowning yourself the Emperor of the French. Now you are Napoleon I. The kings of Europe laughed at the upstart, and in 1805, the whole world rose against you. Russia and Austria marched to crush you, but you met them at Austerlitz. It was your masterpiece. You lured them into a trap, feigning weakness, letting them think they had the upper hand. Then, the sun of Austerlitz rose through the winter mist. The fog cleared, revealing your traps. Your cannons began to shatter the thick ice on the Sachan ponds beneath the feet of the fleeing enemy, dragging horses and men into the freezing depths. This was your zenith, the moment you became the master of Europe. You redrew the continent like a patchwork quilt, handing out crowns to your brothers as if they were toys, creating a grand empire that stretched from the Atlantic to the borders of Russia. But the heights are dangerous. The year 1812 arrived, and with it, the pride that precedes the fall. You made a fatal mistake. You marched on Russia. You thought it would be a quick campaign, a single blow. 600,000 men, the greatest army the world had ever seen, crossed the Niemen River. Borodino became a slaughterhouse, a field of endless fire and screams. You entered Moscow, but you found only a hollow shell. The city burned before your very eyes, a sea of flames that turned the night into a hellish day. You waited for the keys to the Kremlin, for a letter of surrender that never came. Instead, you received the bite of guerrilla warfare and the arrival of the Russian General Winter. The Grande Armée, once invincible, turned into a procession of shadows, frozen skeletons huddled in the snows. You lost everything in the white silence of the retreat. Paris fell in 1814, and the world you built collapsed. You abdicated, exiled to the tiny island of Elba, but Elba was only a respite, a cage too small for an eagle. Your 100 days were the most insane comeback in history. You landed on the coast of France with a handful of men, and as the king's armies came to arrest you, they dropped their guns and wept, shouting your name. You took back an empire without firing a single shot. But then came Waterloo, the mud of Belgium, the blunders of your marshals, and the arrival of the Prussians when you needed them least. The dream ended in the rain. You finished your life on St. Helena, a jagged rock in the middle of the Atlantic. A small, damp house, British sentries watching your every move and the endless, maddening roar of the ocean. You spent your days dictating your memoirs, fighting your last battles on paper, knowing that death was closing in. But look again. You died on a rock, but you conquered time. You remained in history as an eternal colossus, a name that will be spoken as long as men tell stories of greatness and ruin. Your name is Napoleon.